When Nathan handed me the DNA test results, my first instinct was to laugh. A nervous, incredulous laugh, the kind that escapes when reality bends so violently that your brain can't keep up. But then I saw his face, cold and impassive, and the laughter died in my throat. This baby isn't mine, Emily. The DNA test proves it. The words were delivered with such conviction that for a split second I questioned my own reality. I had never been with another man. Not once. Not even in the fleeting realm of drunken mistakes or meaningless flirtations. This baby, the one growing inside me, was Nathan's. I reached for the papers, my fingers trembling. Official-looking documents, stamped and signed, filled with cold, undeniable numbers. I wasn't a geneticist, but I could read the percentage. 0.00% probability of paternity. Impossible. My stomach twisted, a sickening churn of confusion and dread. "There's been a mistake," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Nathan exhaled sharply, as if my denial was an inconvenience. "Emily, I'm not doing this with you. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." My breath hitched. "Nathan, please, just think about this. What if the test was wrong? What if—" His eyes flashed with something sharp, impatience. Guilt? "This is your mess to deal with now," he cut in. "I'm not raising another man's child." And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, gripping the fraudulent document, feeling my world collapse in slow, agonizing increments. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, pressing a hand against my swollen belly. My child, our child, shifted inside me, a reminder that he was real, that he was mine, and that Nathan was a liar. But no one else saw it that way. Word spread fast. Within days, I became the villain in a scandal I never authored. Nathan's family cut all ties, my friends, our friends, distanced themselves with sympathetic but cautious smiles, and even strangers whispered when they saw me. The narrative was clear. I had cheated, gotten pregnant, and Nathan, poor, unsuspecting Nathan, had done what any reasonable man would do. Except none of it was true. I gave birth alone, held my son alone, learned to be a mother alone, while Nathan moved on, his life unscathed. But truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's buried beneath the weight of deception. 8 months later, it came in the form of an unexpected voicemail. "Emily, I don't know what's going on, but your husband paid someone to alter those results. I thought you should know." Dr. Allen's voice was hesitant but firm, each word punctuated by something I hadn't felt in months. Validation. My blood ran cold, and then it boiled. Nathan had destroyed my life with a single lie. Now it was time to destroy his. I didn't confront him in private. No, that was too easy. Instead, I filed a lawsuit. Fraud, forgery, emotional distress. The evidence was undeniable. The court ordered a real DNA test, and when the results came in, the truth was printed in black and white. Nathan was 99.99% the father. The fallout was delicious. His reputation, ruined. His family, horrified. His new girlfriend, the one he had left me for, gone. And when he came crawling back begging for a second chance, I just smiled, kissed my son's forehead, and shut the door in his face. Nathan had built his life on lies, but this one had been his masterpiece. A cruel, calculated deception that stripped me of everything: my marriage, my dignity, my peace. For months, I had lived in the shadow of that lie, doubting myself, drowning in whispered accusations and judgmental stares. But now, with the truth in my hands, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: power. The lawsuit was just the beginning. I wanted more than justice. I wanted to watch Nathan squirm, to see his carefully crafted world crumble the way mine had. His arrogance had always been his weakness, the belief that he could manipulate reality to suit his needs. But reality, as it turned out, had sharp teeth. When the real DNA results came in, I made sure they reached everyone who had ever doubted me. Nathan's family received neatly packaged copies. His employer got an anonymous email, and his new girlfriend found hers in an unmarked envelope. Social media did the rest. A few well-placed posts, and suddenly, the story wasn't about the poor betrayed husband. It was about the man who forged a paternity test to escape fatherhood. The betrayal wasn't mine, it was his, and people turned on him fast. His mother, the woman who had once embraced me like a daughter, called me in tears. "Emily, she started, but I cut her off. There was nothing to say. Where had her doubt been when I was pregnant and alone? His father, ever the stoic businessman, released a carefully worded statement condemning his son's actions. Nathan was humiliated, and for the first time, he had no one left to blame but himself. Then came the legal consequences. Fraud wasn't a small accusation. The court didn't take kindly to falsified medical records, especially not in a case that had led to financial and emotional damages. He had to pay, literally, court fees, emotional distress, child support backdated to my son's birth. The numbers climbed higher and higher, and with each ruling in my favor, Nathan lost more ground. But the most satisfying moment? Seeing him in that courtroom, his usual confidence replaced by something raw, fear, desperation. He had spent months parading himself as the victim, but now stripped of his lies, he was just a man exposed, a fraud, a coward. And when it was all over, when the dust had settled, he came to me one last time, not with anger, not with arrogance, just quiet, pathetic regret. "I made a mistake," he admitted, voice hoarse. For a moment, I just stared at him. The man I had loved once, the man I had trusted with my life. He looked smaller now, diminished, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no desire for revenge, just a quiet certainty that I had won. I cradled my son in my arms, met Nathan's pleading gaze, and said the words he had once thrown at me so carelessly. "This is your mess to deal with now." Then I closed the door, and this time it stayed shut. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating, but it wasn't the same crushing loneliness I had felt all those months ago. This was different. This was peace. I stood there for a moment, listening to my own steady breath, to the faint sounds of my son stirring in my arms. Nathan was gone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't care if he ever came back. But the aftermath of destruction isn't always as clean as closing a door. Nathan's fall from grace had been spectacular, and it didn't take long before the consequences started rippling outward. His job was the first casualty. The company he worked for had built its reputation on integrity. Trustworthiness was everything in his field. When news of his forgery spread, they wasted no time distancing themselves. He wasn't just fired, he was blacklisted. No one wanted to hire a man who had falsified medical documents and dragged his own wife through public humiliation. His carefully curated image, the successful, charming professional, was gone. Then came the financial collapse. Court-ordered child support payments, legal fees, and the fallout of losing his job hit him all at once. He had always prided himself on his wealth, on the lifestyle he had built. But now he was drowning. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had been forced to sell his condo, move into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the high-rise luxury he once flaunted. And still, I didn't care. I had spent months struggling, surviving, rebuilding myself from the ground up while he thrived on a lie. Now it was his turn to understand what it felt like to be abandoned, to be whispered about, to have everything he took for granted ripped away. But the most unexpected twist came when his own family turned on him completely. His mother had been the last to hold out hope for him. But when the truth settled in, even she couldn't justify his actions. She reached out to me again, not for forgiveness, but to see her grandson. I hesitated. This was the same woman who had looked me in the eyes while I was 7 months pregnant and told me I was no longer welcome in their family. The same woman who had cast me aside without a second thought. But now, faced with the undeniable proof of Nathan's deception, she wanted a second chance. And part of me, some deep wounded part, wanted to deny her, to make her feel the same isolation I had endured. But then I looked down at my son, at his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I knew I couldn't let my bitterness define his future. So I set my terms. She could see him, but only on my conditions. No lectures, no rewriting history, no attempts to mend what had been shattered. She agreed without hesitation, desperate to cling to the one piece of family she had left. Nathan, on the other hand, didn't get that privilege. He tried, of course. The text started first. Apologies laced with excuses, messages carefully crafted to sound remorseful but never quite taking full responsibility. Then came the attempts to show up unannounced at the daycare, at places he knew I frequented. Each time I turned him away. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. Months passed. My son grew stronger, happier, untouched by the storm that had once consumed my life. And me, I was free. Not just from Nathan, but from the weight of his betrayal, from the suffocating need to prove myself to people who had never truly believed in me. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Because while Nathan's world had collapsed, mine had finally begun. I never expected the healing to come so slowly, but as each day passed, I realized that healing doesn't work on a timeline. It wasn't just about moving on from Nathan. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself that I had buried for so long. The woman who had once believed in love, in trust, in partnership. She wasn't gone, but she had been buried beneath years of doubt, manipulation, and fear. And with each small victory, each tender moment with my son, each accomplishment I achieved on my own, I was starting to find her again. Still, there were moments when the weight of everything that had happened threatened to swallow me whole. Nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what would have happened if I had just ignored my instincts, if I hadn't trusted Nathan so blindly. What if I had figured out the truth before it had spiraled so out of control? What if I had been stronger, smarter? But those were questions with no answers. And the more I asked them, the more I realized they weren't worth asking. What mattered now was what I could control. And what I could control was moving forward, building a life that was mine and my son's. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd been too proud or too afraid to do before. At first, the sessions felt like an exercise in dredging up painful memories. But over time, I began to see the value in unraveling the mess of emotions I'd been living with for so long. And slowly, piece by piece, the trauma started to fade. Not completely. Nothing ever heals completely, especially not when it's this deep. But it softened. The sting of Nathan's betrayal became less of a sharp edge and more of a distant bruise. Nathan, on the other hand, remained a shadow in the background of my life. Occasionally, I'd hear about him through the grapevine, his continuing struggles, his attempts to regain some semblance of normalcy. But none of it fazed me. He had become a cautionary tale, the man whose lies had been exposed, who had gambled everything and lost. He had tried to destroy me, and in the end, he had destroyed himself. But I couldn't deny that part of me still wondered what would happen if our paths crossed again. What would he say? Would he apologize? Would he beg for forgiveness once more? Then one evening, as I was putting my son to bed, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I froze when I heard it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My pulse quickened, and for the briefest moment, I wondered if Nathan had somehow found his way back into my life. I peeked through the peephole. It wasn't Nathan. Instead, there was a young woman standing on the doorstep. Her posture was stiff, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked broken. And, in a moment of clarity, I recognized her. It was the same woman Nathan had left me for. Her name was Kate, and for a fleeting second, I saw the same fear in her eyes that I had once carried. She didn't speak when I opened the door. Instead, she simply stared at me, her lips trembling, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a strange kind of empathy for her. I I need to talk to you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I could have slammed the door. I could have told her to leave, to take her place in the wreckage of Nathan's lies. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the understanding that she too had been duped, that Nathan's manipulation wasn't just confined to me. I stepped aside. Come in. And for the next hour, she told me her side of the story, how Nathan had wooed her with the same charm, the same lies, how when the truth had started to surface about our son, Nathan had turned on her too. He had convinced her that I was the one who had lied, that I had deceived him into believing he was the father. I listened, my mind spinning, but there was something strange in the air, a sense of closure, perhaps. Maybe even redemption. Because as Kate spoke, I realized something that I hadn't before. I wasn't alone in my suffering. Nathan had hurt more than just me. He had destroyed everything he touched, and now the wreckage lay scattered around him, touching even those who had once been in his life. When she finished, I nodded slowly, the weight of the moment settling between us. I'm sorry, I said, my voice soft. I know what it feels like to be lied to be made to feel like you're crazy for not believing in the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment we stood there, two women bound by the same betrayal. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know about the baby. I didn't know what he had done. I understand, I said, the words tasting foreign on my tongue. But they were real. They were genuine. Kate left that night, and as I watched her walk down the path, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Nathan's lies had touched many lives, but they hadn't broken all of us. And somehow, in the strangest way, I had found a small measure of healing by sharing my story with her. The door shut behind me, and I felt the weight of the past lift just a little bit more. Nathan was still a part of my story, but he no longer defined it. And as I looked at my son sleeping peacefully in his crib, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right choice. I had rebuilt my life. I had reclaimed my power. And nothing, no lie, no betrayal, could take that from me. I had won. The quiet in my home was almost serene after Kate left. There was something deeply final in that moment. The last of Nathan's ghost had been laid to rest, at least for me. His presence had haunted me for so long, but now, as I looked at the empty room where he used to stand, the feeling was gone. It was a relief, though at the same time it was unsettling. How much of my life had I spent in the shadow of his manipulation and deceit? The next few weeks passed in a blur of normalcy. My days were filled with the rhythmic care of my son, feeding, changing, rocking him to sleep. And in those simple repetitive acts, I found solace. It was a stark contrast to the chaos I'd lived through with Nathan, and at times it almost felt like a dream. I would sometimes catch myself wondering if I had imagined everything that had happened, if maybe I had built the entire ordeal up in my mind. But then, I would catch sight of the legal papers in my drawer or hear a distant, rumbling story of Nathan's ongoing downfall, and reality would settle back into my bones like a weight I couldn't escape. But as much as I craved the quiet of my new life, I also found myself seeking something more. I had spent so long surviving that I had forgotten what it felt like to live. The woman I was before all of this, the one who dreamed, who planned, who believed in love and in herself, had been swallowed up by the past, by everything Nathan had stolen from me. It was time to find her again. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen in the shadow of who I had been. My son, this beautiful, innocent life I had created, deserved a mother who was whole, and I deserved to be that mother. I began with small things. I enrolled in a night class at a local community college, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I joined a book club, found myself laughing and talking with people who didn't know my story, who weren't wrapped up in the drama of Nathan's betrayal. And slowly, I began to feel like me again. But there was still something unsettled in my heart, still something unresolved. It wasn't until months later, when I received another unexpected call, that I realized what I had been avoiding. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my phone rang. The number wasn't familiar, but something made me answer. Emily. I froze. The voice was calm, too calm, and it took me a moment to place it. It was Dr. Allen, the man who had conducted the original paternity test. Dr. Allen? I asked, my voice suddenly tight. My heart began to race, the old tension creeping back into my bones. I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you need to know something, he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. My stomach turned. What is it? He paused for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his words sent a chill through me. I believe Nathan had someone alter the test results again. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. I hadn't expected this. After everything, after the legal battle, the very public exposure of Nathan's lies, how could he still be trying to manipulate the truth? How could he not see that he had already lost everything? Alter it again? I repeated, my voice shaking. Yes, Dr. Allen replied. I've been reviewing some of the paperwork and there's something off. I'm not sure what Nathan's angle is, but I think he's trying to cover his tracks even now. I leaned back against the wall, my mind racing. Why? Why after all this time? Hadn't I already proven the truth? Hadn't he already lost? But there it was again. The gnawing feeling that he wouldn't stop. Nathan was a man who couldn't accept defeat, who couldn't live with the consequences of his own actions. He needed to rewrite the past, even if it meant dragging me, and now my son, back into his web of lies. Thank you for letting me know, I said, though my voice was tight with the growing fury inside me. I'll take care of it. The line went silent for a moment before Dr. Allen spoke again, almost as if he had something more to say, but didn't quite know how. Emily, he said quietly, be careful. This isn't over. I hung up, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't know what to feel, what to do. Nathan had already taken so much from me, but this was a new level of cruelty. He wasn't just trying to ruin me. He was trying to erase me completely from his story. He wanted to make me the villain, to cast doubt on everything I had worked so hard to rebuild, and I couldn't let that happen. I thought about my son, about how I had fought for him, fought to keep him safe from the lies Nathan had spun. And now I realized something that chilled me to my core. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my son. Nathan's need for control, his obsessive rewriting of reality. It was only a matter of time before he tried to claim what wasn't his again. I had to act. The next day, I gathered all the documents I could find, the original test results, the court papers, everything. I contacted my lawyer and told him everything. He was just as shocked as I was, But he assured me that Nathan's actions weren't going to go unnoticed. But even with the legal steps in motion, I knew I needed more than just paperwork. I needed to confront him, not in a courtroom, not behind the safety of a lawyer's office. I needed to look him in the eye, to see for myself just how far his lies would go. And so I planned my next move. I was done running, done hiding. Nathan had already tried to destroy everything. But now I was going to make sure the world knew who he truly was. This time, there would be no escaping the truth. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I kept my focus on the bigger picture, protecting my son, exposing Nathan for the liar he was, and ensuring that he couldn't manipulate his way out of the mess he had created. But underneath it all, there was a quiet storm brewing inside me. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It wasn't even about revenge, not really. What had started as a fight for my son's truth was morphing into something more personal. I had to put an end to Nathan's hold over me, completely and utterly. I kept my thoughts on my son. Every moment I spent with him reminded me of the life I was rebuilding, the strength I was finding again. He deserved a mother who could hold her head high, who wasn't shackled by the past. And Nathan's lies, his betrayal, couldn't take that from me. He had tried, but he hadn't succeeded. The call from my lawyer came just before the weekend, a strange sense of finality in his voice. The legal battle was set to continue, but it seemed there was more evidence coming to light. Nathan's attempts to manipulate the paternity test results hadn't gone unnoticed. The fraud he had committed was undeniable, and the consequences of that were starting to pile up. Nathan's reputation was already in tatters, but now there was the question of criminal charges. And it wasn't just about the test. There were other things. More lies, more deceit that were coming to light. The web he had spun to control every aspect of his life was unraveling, and he couldn't stop it. I had expected him to fight back, to try to twist things in his favor, but what I hadn't anticipated was how far he would go to try to control the narrative once more. Nathan reached out to me in the middle of that weekend, of all times. My phone buzzed late one Saturday night, and when I saw his name, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. It was as if he believed that after everything, I would still drop everything and come running when he called. I didn't answer. He tried again the next day, and the next. Eventually, I gave in. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe it was a part of me that still needed to hear him grovel, still needed to hear the man who had torn my life apart finally admit what he had done. Or maybe it was simply that I had reached a point where I didn't fear him anymore. Whatever the reason, I picked up the phone on the fourth ring. Emily. His voice was soft, almost pleading. It was the voice I had once fallen for, the voice that had made me believe every word he said, even when I knew better. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how things went down, and I regret it. All of it. I didn't speak immediately. I just let his words hang in the air. I knew it was coming. He was going to try to manipulate me again, tell me whatever he thought would get him out of the hole he dug for himself. But I wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his charm. Not anymore. "Do you?" I asked, my voice icy, controlled. "Do you really regret it, Nathan? Or are you just trying to save yourself?" He fell silent, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. This wasn't how he'd planned it. He had expected me to crumble, to beg for his forgiveness, to want him back. But I had learned a hard lesson in the months since he had left me. Nathan wasn't the man I had thought he was. He wasn't someone who loved me. He was someone who loved control, who loved manipulation, who would do anything to keep himself on top. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Nathan said finally, his voice thick with something that could have been guilt. But I wasn't fooled. I just want to explain. I need you to understand why I did what I did." "No," I said, cutting him off. You don't get to do that. Not anymore. There was a pause, and then he sighed, the sound low and resigned. I thought I could fix things. I thought I could make it all go away. His voice softened. I thought we could go back to how we were. It was almost laughable. Did he really think that after everything I would fall for this again? You broke me, Nathan. You broke everything we had. I don't care how many times you try to apologize or explain. The truth is, you're a liar, and no amount of sweet talk or regret is going to change that. I heard him shift on the other end of the line, maybe trying to find a way to salvage something. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that. His voice faltered for the first time, and there was a hint of desperation in it. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt a wave of anger, deep and raw, rising inside me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I almost felt like I could explode with the fury of it all. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew when you left me. You knew when you lied about our son's paternity. You knew when you manipulated everyone around you into believing I was the one who had betrayed you. And you did it because it was easier than taking responsibility for your own actions. Silence. I let the words sit in the air, giving them weight. Nathan had a choice. He always had a choice. But he had chosen the easy path, the one that didn't require him to face his own darkness. He had tried, but he hadn't succeeded. The call from my lawyer came just before the weekend, a strange sense of finality in his voice. The legal battle was set to continue, but it seemed there was more evidence coming to light. Nathan's attempts to manipulate the paternity test results hadn't gone unnoticed. The fraud he had committed was undeniable, and the consequences of that were starting to pile up. Nathan's reputation was already in tatters, but now there was the question of criminal charges. And it wasn't just about the test. There were other things. More lies, more deceit that were coming to light. The web he had spun to control every aspect of his life was unraveling, and he couldn't stop it. I had expected him to fight back, to try to twist things in his favor, but what I hadn't anticipated was how far he would go to try to control the narrative once more. Nathan reached out to me in the middle of that weekend, of all times. My phone buzzed late one Saturday night, and when I saw his name, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. It was as if he believed that after everything, I would still drop everything and come running when he called. I didn't answer. He tried again the next day, and the next. Eventually, I gave in. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe it was a part of me that still needed to hear him grovel, still needed to hear the man who had torn my life apart finally admit what he had done. Or maybe it was simply that I had reached a point where I didn't fear him anymore. Whatever the reason, I picked up the phone on the fourth ring. Emily. His voice was soft, almost pleading. It was the voice I had once fallen for, the voice that had made me believe every word he said, even when I knew better. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how things went down, and I regret it. All of it. I didn't speak immediately. I just let his words hang in the air. I knew it was coming. He was going to try to manipulate me again, tell me whatever he thought would get him out of the hole he dug for himself. But I wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his charm. Not anymore. Do you? I asked, my voice icy, controlled. Do you really regret it, Nathan? Or are you just trying to save yourself? He fell silent, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. This wasn't how he'd planned it. He had expected me to crumble, to beg for his forgiveness, to want him back. But I had learned a hard lesson in the months since he had left me. Nathan wasn't the man I had thought he was. He wasn't someone who loved me. He was someone who loved control, who loved manipulation, who would do anything to keep himself on top. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Nathan said finally, his voice thick with something that could have been guilt. But I wasn't fooled. I just, I just want to explain. I need you to understand why I did what I did. No, I said, cutting him off. You don't get to do that. Not anymore. There was a pause, and then he sighed, the sound low and resigned. I thought I could fix things. I thought I could make it all go away. His voice softened. I thought we could go back to how we were. It was almost laughable. Did he really think that after everything I would fall for this again? You broke me, Nathan. You broke everything we had. I don't care how many times you try to apologize or explain. The truth is, you're a liar, and no amount of sweet talk or regret is going to change that. I heard him shift on the other end of the line, maybe trying to find a way to salvage something. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that. His voice faltered for the first time, and there was a hint of desperation in it. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt a wave of anger, deep and raw, rising inside me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I almost felt like I could explode with the fury of it all. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew when you left me. You knew when you lied about our son's paternity. You knew when you manipulated everyone around you into believing I was the one who had betrayed you. And you did it because it was easier than taking responsibility for your own actions. Silence. I let the words sit in the air, giving them weight. Nathan had a choice. He always had a choice. But he had chosen the easy path, the one that didn't require him to face his own darkness. Her life, once shattered by betrayal, is now slowly being rebuilt, piece by piece. The world around her reacts in a way she never expected. Her friends, who had once whispered behind her back, now rally around her. They apologize for doubting her, for not seeing the truth sooner. The community, which had once turned its back on her, begins to show support. People see her not as the woman scorned, but as a survivor who fought for what was right. But the most significant change is within her. She has learned to trust herself again, to believe in her ability to rise above even the deepest betrayals. She no longer holds on to the bitterness that once consumed her. As for Nathan, his life is in ruins. He disappears from the public eye, a shadow of his former self. He doesn't try to reach out to Emily again. The door is closed, and he knows it. His name is no longer spoken with respect. Instead, it's whispered as a cautionary tale, a man who let his ego destroy everything he once had. Months pass, and Emily is finally able to look back on everything without the weight of anger pressing on her heart. Her son, now a toddler, is growing into a bright and curious child. She watches him play in the park one afternoon, his laughter filling the air, and for the first time in a long time, she feels completely at peace. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzes. It's a message from an unknown number. Emily hesitates before opening it. The message is brief. I'm sorry, can we talk? It's Nathan.D. Lucrative, collapses under the weight of the scandal. His family disowns him, and his reputation is obliterated. Even his business ventures, which had once been solid, crumble. The man who thought he could control everything is now a man with nothing. As for Emily, she doesn't revel in his downfall. She's not angry anymore. The satisfaction she feels comes from the knowledge that justice has been served, and that Nathan's lies were exposed for the world to see. There is no thrill in his destruction, only peace, a sense of closure. In the months following the trial, Emily's life begins to take shape again. She continues to raise her son with love and care, learning how to navigate single motherhood. While the road isn't easy, she has found a new strength in herself that she never knew existed. She's not defined by Nathan's betrayal, and she refuses to let it consume her. Her career, too, begins to flourish again. But Emily just smiles, shaking her head. The past is the past, and Nathan has no place in her future. As she watches her son run toward her, his little arms open wide, she feels the weight of everything that has come to pass lift off her shoulders. She doesn't need to explain herself to anyone. She doesn't need anyone's approval. She's built her life back on her own terms, and that's all that matters. With a deep breath, she deletes the message. And with a final glance at the phone, she mutters softly to herself, "I'm done." The final shot lingers on her face, a quiet smile, peaceful and triumphant. As she turns her attention back to her son, the story is over. Nathan's fate is sealed, and Emily's future is brighter than ever. You made your choices, Nathan. Now live with them. As Emily walks away, hand in hand with her son, the screen fades to black.